your plan.
Okay. Hi, everybody. So we're going to have Dave here. I'm going to turn the camera so we can see him, let him do that this morning. Get started here in a minute. And all of you who are going to be on live today, let the front desk know so they can go ahead and add you guys in and send you the documents.
Do you got everything?
I think so.
Hi. How are you? See you Friday. Yeah, it's Friday. I'll see you Friday. Good to see you again.
Experience realtors.
Oh. Well, it's because we got Gina in our back pocket.
Yeah.
What's it? How are you, brother? I'm good. No, wish this rain would stop, but you know, moose hunting is going to be a total nightmare.
When are you going?
We got to commit cow tag.
Ooh.
Yeah, super excited, but we have to cross. Oh, I'm gonna sit by you. That's okay. We're not allowed to talk though, because I'm gonna like.
You just want to sit farther away from Willie.
Exactly. Because we're gonna be partying the whole time. We want to like zone in on you. You're the man of the hour.
Oh, he is.
The man of two hours.
Even though he's from Juneau. What's that? You just put me on the spot.
I'm sorry, yeah.
Hey, Whitney.
Lily, how are you?
Hey, there you
You know the statute,
I'm
but-
smart, thank you.
go. I have to say this. With Dave, sorry, Dave, yeah.
Just Saturdays. You know me. Yeah.
So where are you going to start? Are you going to start with a radar?
Yeah. I'll start with this one.
Okay, so if you want, I can drive, or if you want to drive, we'll just do, and then you can just arrow page two. Yeah, you'll have to escape out
Oh.
here, and then you'll go right here to
I'll never forget that. And I drank it. Oh, I've never in my life. I'm so sick.
there.
Oh, yeah.
And
So
then
I
you
don't
can
trust
go.
these things anymore. I'm like, yes. Willie, you're
I'll help you with that.
That's my normal.
That's your spot.
That's my go.
That's true. I always see you on the Zoom meeting in the same spot. You, Larry, and Bill Ballard. Yeah.
For the past, since 2007.
I was in high school that year.
That's great. That would just help me. Thanks. I appreciate that.
And you'll have to talk that out loud, other than your
I love you,
voice.
Willie Brown. You know I do.
Love you too.
I know you do. I'll put this closer to you.
Oh,
Referral.
my brother.
Yeah, let's have a little round. You know?
Does everyone have their?
Such a old family friend. Everyone. So I didn't get referred to him, it would have been from someone else. And that would hurt. In fact, I had marked her for 10 years and she thought I was still a realtor.
Okay.
The first time I got my real estate license originally.
Did you get my listing?
Nine.
Huh? I sent you that listing for your Ocean View.
I explained to her.
Oh, I didn't get it yet, but thank you. Okay, so everyone, if you don't already know, Dave Mortensen here, Discovery Home Inspections. He's going to do our class today, and he's going to talk about all kinds of fantastic things like radon and the anatomy of a house and why you should hire a home inspector and kind of like the checklist of what buyers need to know. So how many of you have actually been at a home inspection with a client before? So almost everybody. A couple people haven't. So it'll be nice because when you go through, you'll probably still, even if you've been through a home inspection. And let me ask you this other question: when you did go to the home inspection, do you follow the home inspector around, or do you kind of sit and chat with your client?
I follow them.
I follow them around, yeah, like.
Well,
what's going on?
there, it's just me and the inspector.
Oh, the client didn't go; it was just you and the
But
inspector.
all my people have been like out of state, so.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, I follow him.
Yeah. Okay.
I also want the client to follow him,
Yes.
so they hear what he's saying, and it's not just
But
me.
sometimes they don't.
I know,
You have to like say
exactly.
like, hey,
Hey, you
can go.
need to go.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah, good information.
Yeah. Well, Dave, I'm gonna hand it over to you because there's a lot you have to go over. And so, go for it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks. Yeah,
Thank you for
thanks.
being here.
Thanks for the opportunity. Appreciate
Yeah.
it. Yeah, I know most of you, so that's who's new in real estate. Oh, it's gonna be that kind of class.
Bailey,
Yeah.
yes.
Bailey started the tone.
We have a flavor.
Yeah.
I know.
You're in for a treat.
I'm much more comfortable with that kind of tone than me just standing up here droning on and on and on. So it's 19 pages of this, and then I have a short radon PowerPoint that we need to get through. But any questions you have, holler it out. Raise your hand. I just am more comfortable with that sort of class.
So the class is typically we do 2 hours.
Okay.
So we can do like an hour, a little bit of a break, and then finish the second hour, or however you want to do it. But you have 2 hours to get
Okay.
through it.
Yeah, however you guys want to do it. We can take a break or not. Just holler when we get to that point.
Sounds good.
Just a little bit of background. I've been a home inspector for 20 years. I was a contractor before that. So I kind of know the ins and outs of the house, how they're built. And I kind of look at a house and already know what's going to be coming up typically. In Anchorage, it's almost always water. But water is a huge water table, high water table here. So we have issues with water all the time. But other times it's pretty obvious. It doesn't take a rocket science sometimes when you get up on a roof and you see something like that. Or creative homeowners do silly things as well. So anyway, Gina sent me this question: educate the licensees so they can better prepare their buyer for what is to be brought to light in an inspection, what is not going to be covered like cosmetic items, and giving them some education so when they get the report, they have some knowledge and it's not Greek to them.
Mhm.
So first of all, do you have to have a home inspection? No, you do not. But you do. And there are some programs, and you probably know them off the top of your head. It's usually
The
low
early
income.
program.
The
The
what?
early program.
So there are some programs that require a home inspection, but most of them don't. Is that fair? Most of them do not. So we had a home inspector state statute passed in March of 2004. Before that time, it was kind of the Wild West. You could do anything you wanted. You could hire an engineer, you could hire an architect, and you still can actually. But in 2004, they came out with this state statute. Home inspection means a visual examination performed in accordance with the standards of practice adopted by the department of the readily accessible parts of one or more of the following systems, blah, 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 blah. So the operative word here is visual. There's very few things that that come up on an inspection that we can't point the buyer to and say, look right exactly here, and I can tell you what's wrong with this component of the house. That's the minimum you have to do. You can always go above that. Home inspectors do that all the time with infrared cameras. That's kind of a way to see inside of a wall or look for missing insulation or water entry, that sort of thing. But it's even easier for me to say what's not a home inspection than what is a home inspection. And this next list is representative of that. So a home inspection is not technically exhaustive. So we're not going to run the furnace through all its phases. We're not going to take it apart. We're not going to tell you how old the roof is or how long you have left on the furnace or left on the roof. At least it's not going to go in the report. We might tell the client, if the client really wants to know how much time is left on the roof, we might verbally say that to somebody, but we don't have to put it in the report as far as the state statute goes. Is that all clear? We don't have to report on concealed conditions, latent defects. All that kind of stuff is hidden. We don't even have to move furniture if we don't want to. We don't have to move deck furniture if it's on a deck. We don't have to move a sofa, anything like that. We just don't have to do it. The state just says, don't do it, in fact. Our SOPs for any home inspection organization we belong to also says, don't do it because it opens you up to liability. We do it. At Discovery, we do it. we do move furniture when we suspect something. We do try to really identify what's going on in the house, because almost always you're going to find, the home inspector is going to find the broken truss at the very farthest part of the attic. They're going to find the water damage at the very farthest, hardest to get to part of the crawl space. So we're going to try to get to those parts whenever we can, but you don't have to. That's the important thing for you to understand and to prepare your client for, is the home inspector does not have to do those things. The expectation that the home inspector is going to find everything wrong with your house is really a misnomer, because they're just not going to. In fact, I could do a home inspection on a house, somebody comes in right behind me, finds something else in the house. It's just, we just have different strengths. We're not required to determine the condition of a system, the remaining life, we talked about that, the strength, adequacy, effectiveness, anything like, is this beam strong enough to hold up the house? Well, we're not engineers, so we don't have to report on that kind of stuff. But if we notice deflection, if we notice problems with the beam, we absolutely will say, yeah, you need to get an engineer. Okay, so how many of you knew that there was 3 different types of inspectors in Alaska? One person. So in the municipality of Anchorage, you have the municipal inspectors. And so when a house is being built, if you're in the muni, the municipal inspectors will go out and they will inspect the house as it's going up. So the foundation's being built, the muni will send out a foundation expert, and they will tell the contractor, go for it, pour this slab, pour this foundation, and then the framing crew comes in, and the muni sends out the framing inspector, and then the electrician, plumbing inspector, the installation inspector, all the way up until you get what's called your certificate of occupancy. And that's in the municipality. Each municipal inspector is ICC rated. And that's right up here. It stands for the International Code Council. So that's the first type of inspector. The second type is a residential inspector that has met that state statute, AS 8.18. All that means is you pass the nationalized test and you carry so much insurance. That's about all you need to do is throw out your shingle. You obviously need a lot more to stay in business, but to become a home inspector, that's all you have to do. To be an existing home inspector. That means that if the house has been slept in for one night, an existing home inspector can do that inspection. Okay, is that clear? The third different type of inspector is the new home inspector. The new home inspector has to pass 4 ICC rated tests. So they have to pass all those tests that the municipal inspectors have to pass. Let's see, let me back up. They have to pass 4 ICC tests to do new home construction inspections, where the municipal inspectors, they would only have to pass 1 of them, right? So they only have to pass, say, the electrical inspector course to do the electrical inspection. The plumbing inspector would only have to pass the plumbing one. But if you're going to do if I'm going to do new construction inspections in the state of Alaska, I have to pass all 4. Okay. There's very few of us that have that designation. I'm one, Troy Bloxham is one, and Kevin Jones. And Troy's actually getting out, that's the rumor. So there's really only 2 of us that are new construction certified in Anchorage right now. But there are a bunch in the valley because the valley has a whole bunch of new construction. So there are new construction certified inspectors out there. So you don't have to hire us to do your new construction in Anchorage. So what do we inspect differently for new construction? So an existing home inspector is not doing a code inspection. They don't even have to know the code. Most of us know the code because you always have to have something to back up what you're saying. But existing home inspection, a home inspector is not going to quote you the code or put it in their report because they're not supposed to. They're not code rated. They're not ICC code officials. That makes sense? Okay. If you're doing a new home construction in Anchorage, then you have to go by the current code that's adopted by the municipality. And that's right there as well, the 2018 International Residential Code. That means that a new construction inspector has to be, qualified, knows that code inside and out. And when they get hired to do a new construction, they have to go in and they have to identify all the new code requirements for that house versus maybe one that was built 3, 4, 5 years ago. Where an existing home inspection does none of that. Okay? So it's a whole different, much higher level of inspection than the existing home inspector.
So can you touch on the difference of that and like egress windows and things like that? So like, that's a health and safety
Egress window?
requirement,
Mhm.
but it's not, I mean, there's code that it has to be so many inches if it's in a basement or whatever. But that comes up a ton. Are you gonna cover that or talk about that just a little bit? Like who?
There is a whole nother page coming up on egress windows, but that's a good point. The muni is the authority having jurisdiction. So if they want to make up a rule, they can, and they do all the time. And this is one of them. There was so many egress windows that didn't meet egress. You guys know what egress windows are? The ability of the firemen to get in, the ability of the firemen to carry you back out. 99 times out of 10, out of 100, they're going to break the window. But the code does say you have to have a window that meets certain parameters. The muni said, oh my gosh, we allowed all these windows to be installed and they don't meet the egress requirements. So we're going to make up a rule that says they don't have to. They can be smaller, they can be higher, and that's all coming up in another slide. If you're doing an inspection in the valley, you can't use that exception. Only in Anchorage. That sort of answer. Okay. Okay, so the next one here. So this top map is showing the municipality of Anchorage. You can see that it goes from about the Kinnick Bridge to almost Whittier. But the bottom map is showing what's called the Building Safety Service Area. The Building Safety Service Area is where the municipal inspectors are doing their inspecting. Okay, that's Eagle River to about Potter's Marsh, a much smaller area than the entire municipality. So if you're going to build a house in this area, the municipal inspectors are going to come out and they're going to do those phase inspections. When your foundation's done, they come out. When your framing's done, they come out, all that kind of stuff. When you're outside of that area, you hire a new construction inspector, like myself, or a bunch of valley guys, to do your phase inspections out there. And you don't have to, but there's plenty of financial institutions that want to see that there's been an inspection all the way through, because once the house is built, once you've got your drywall up, once you've got your insulation in it, you can't see if it's got earthquake hold downs. You can't see the plumbing. You can't see the electrical. You can't see all that stuff. So they want to make sure that the money they're lending to the buyer is, or the house that they're lending on is properly built. This yellow one in the middle says, regardless of being within the municipality or not, building code applies. This is kind of a misnomer if you're in the valley, when we're doing an inspection in the valley. We do this all the time. Oh, we don't want an acreage inspector because they're going to, there's no code out here. Well, that's not true. There is a state code, and that's HFC requires a state building code, for all those properties to be built according to that code, which is actually different than acreage. It's a different code. It's the IDC versus the IRC. Anyway, so why are there new construction inspections in acreage if the muni is, watching out for this house being built every step of the way? Any idea? Why would you get a new home inspection if the muni has already given it a certificate of occupancy?
Because they miss things.
Can't trust government work.
Is there a slide on that?
Well, that's exactly right. So the buyer says, okay, fine, the muni has signed up on this house, but I still want to do my due diligence. I'm going to hire a third party who's going to come in here and do that. So Willie and I were just on a recent one where the muni signed off on an electrical permit that I questioned. Sure enough, it wasn't done right. But the muni, the electrical inspector, the Chugach Electric, or
Chugach
Electric was involved, a licensed electrical contractor was involved, a lot of pushback, a lot of pressure on Willie. I mean, I'm a third party, I can take the pressure, but a lot of pressure on Willie, like, hey, who is this stupid home inspector who's calling us? I mean, you're holding things up.
Right.
Let's go. Who are you to question the muni? Well, sure enough, it wasn't right. But I find this all the time. I did a house 3 months ago. They sealed the attic hatch to do what's called a blower door test. And the builder doesn't necessarily want you to cut that as a home inspector. But anyway, it's a brand new house. We cut it, we get up there, there's no insulation in the attic. Zero. How does this happen? Well, it happens because the municipality doesn't have to verify if there's insulation in the attic. Mind-blowing to me.
Seriously, I mean, can you think of the issues that would have caused and the cost that would have caused down the road?
Oh, yeah.
That's crazy.
So we find the first slide where it showed that opening in the roof, that's happened many times. Brand new house, get up on the roof, big holes in the roof, muni sign off on it, or there's no plumbing vents to the roof. How come there's no plumbing? It's really easy, if you do this long enough, but you have to push back. We always push back. It's not right. So that's one reason why you want to do that.
And
So,
I will have to say, I worked with a builder for 20 years, and even when I had both sides of the transaction, the buyer still did a home inspection, and I don't remember a single time when there wasn't at least one thing that they found. Usually very small, not big, huge deals or anything, but there was something that was found. And the builder's happy to fix it because they want it right, because they're warranting the house and all that. Most of the time you get no pushback from the builder at all to get it done. They're happy to do it, whatever it is. But every single time there was something. So it always happens. It happens.
yeah, for $500, $600, whatever the inspector's charging,
Mhm.
it's usually money involved. So what does this mean to you as a realtor, that there's 3 different inspectors? Or let's say, what does it mean to you that there's an existing home inspector and a new home inspector? What does that mean? What's the problem if you hire an existing home inspector to do a new construction inspection?
He's not
Is there a
qualified.
problem?
He's not qualified.
He's not qualified, or she's not qualified. Yeah, either one. They're not qualified. And by state statute, they cannot do it. So this was also a misnomer for many, many years, that any home inspector could do a new home construction. They can't. So they will, there's home inspectors that will do it, but if the proverbial, what hits the fan, you guys have that, you're on the line. You recommended the wrong inspector for that property. Want to stay away from that. Okay. So Gina also wanted me to provide some handouts for, how to prepare a buyer for a home inspection. So here's one. I won't read the whole thing. These are available if you just send me an email. I can give you a digital copy of this, and you can send this out to your buyers. It's really a good idea. I wish more realtors would do this, and sellers too. But so for the buyer, this comes up all the time, the green one. The home inspector won't give the home a pass or fail. That's your job as a buyer. We get this all the time. Would you give this a pass or a fail? Or on a scale of 1 to 10? Or if this was your daughter buying this house, whatever it is. That is not our job. That is not our job. We might say, well, of course, yeah. We might, or we might not, or whatever. But what I usually say is, I was a contractor. I've been doing this for 20 years. Nothing scares me. I can fix all this stuff. You might be scared because there's a broken cover plate on a electrical receptacle, and it's scaring you to death because you have a 6-month-old crawling around on his knees. I can't answer those questions for you. I just put everything in the report, and then it's up to the buyer with your guidance to decide what needs to be asked for. And the market, obviously, in this market, it was just health safety. Well, actually, it wasn't even that. It was well, you guys know. Speaking to the choir here. Anyway, this is available. I think it's the next 2 pages. How much does a home inspection cost? This is according to HUD, it's between $300 and $500, but that's really low for up here. Obviously, you might get a condo, an apartment style condo. They don't have their own heating system. It doesn't take very long for the home inspector. Really easy. But then you get an 8,000 square foot house built in 1959 that's been added on 12 times. Well, that home inspector is going to charge thousands of dollars to do that. It's going to take them all day, maybe even 2 days. It's going to take them a ton of time on the computer. So that's why I think $500 at the high end is really low. Our home inspections start at $495 for a single family. So you're probably looking at more like 300 to maybe 700 range for
I don't
most
really
homes.
know any $300 ones anymore. I think they're more like
I'd be scared of
$400 plus.
Yeah.
Do you send either of these out to a buyer who makes an appointment with you? Like, does this automatically go out? No.
No.
So this would be on the licensee to get this review and then to send it out to your.
Yeah. So I thought,
Don't you guys have, before you provide the report, the buyer has to sign that waiver, the liability form? This is kind of included in that, isn't it?
no, that's at the very end, you get a, what's it called? Basically, come on, I only send it out every
I was
single.
like, what to expect, basically? Or,
Yeah, so now you've had your home inspection. Don't call us because we missed a broken cover plate. Don't call us, we're trying to just set expectations. Expectations in home inspection.
yes, there we go.
Reasonable expectations, yeah. That comes up at the end of the inspection, but at the beginning, it's just an agreement, a contract between us and the client. I thought about sending this out, but it's it's amazing how much pushback I get from licensees. If I overstep in any way, shape, or form, I get a call. And I was sending this out and I got a call. It's not really your job to. So.
But it is your job to.
Well, they had a good point. Their point was, it's our job to prepare our client for the home inspection. It's not your job to do that. Yeah, you're right. It is. I do agree with that. So that's why this is available, if you want to use it. And then be there. So you don't have to go to the inspection. That's a typo, but it means you can't see any problems for yourself. It's so important. When somebody calls me and says, do I have to be there? I say, oh, yes, please. You don't have to be there, but please come to the home inspection. First, they see how hard you work. They see how thorough you are. So when they do see that broken cover plate or whatever else comes up in the house, they're like, wow, gosh, you did a really thorough job. You know, it's kind of, that expectation is already kind of built in. He worked really hard for me. I'm not going to call him about this.
Do you typically get calls from buyers afterwards or down the road or for clarification?
Especially younger buyers. Younger buyers are wanting the faded paint as a health safety item, or they really do. They want everything in the report because their licensee has told them the seller is only going to entertain health safety items. So we want everything on the report. Well, we have to remain constant with how we call things. So we can't put fading paint. We can't put, yesterday we did this beautiful house downtown, pulled a rug back, and the original tile was this color. The rest of the tile was this color because the sun had faded the rest of the flooring. Well, it was going to be an expensive flooring change out, but we can't call that as a health safety. Can't call it as a repair. It's the sun. So anyway, my experience is that younger buyers, and they're very savvy buyers. I'm not saying they're not. They really want every single thing because they don't. A lot of times they don't know how to take care of a house or whatever, and they just don't want that on their plate either. If they have to fix little items. Does that answer your question? Yeah? Okay.
I think also it really helps you as a licensee understand the report better if you're there and you're just, because there's a lot of conversation that happens during the inspection that doesn't show up on the report. And so if you aren't there and you're just reading the report, you may not really fully understand what the issue is, and neither does your buyer, especially again, younger buyer. Maybe they didn't follow him around and you weren't there. And so it just really helps in the negotiating and the repair amendment and understanding the house better if you're there to help them through it.
Oh my gosh, yes. Cracks in foundations. Let's stand there for 10 minutes explaining this is normal. We had a big quake in 2019. It hasn't reached the level of, an engineer. You need to fix it. You should fix it, but you don't need to get too crazy about it. And they stand there, oh, okay, yeah, no big deal. But then they talk to their licensee, and it's like, the sky is falling. We went out of the contract. Wait a minute. So I'll get a call. Hey, what did you tell them about the crack in the foundation? It's really good to be at the inspections. So no, remember what he said? This is no big deal. You just have to get some foundation epoxy. $100 later, you're back in business.
I think then it also enables you to have a conversation with the buyer. They can ask questions, and then if you can, soothe their mind, then it won't come up later. You know what I mean?
Sure. Yeah.
So,
Yeah, or if the seller doesn't want to do that repair, they know, okay, it's $100. Big deal. Okay, here's the next one is home inspections for sellers. And this one's really kind of irksome for inspectors. When you show up at a house, you can't get to the electrical panel because there's a freezer full of meat in front of it. You can't get to the crawl space because all their stuff is in there. You can't get into the attic. You can't, all their, furs are in the closet or whatever. We're not supposed to move anything and they're not there. And it just gets crazy when you just can't do your job. So this is another good one too. If you're the listing licensee, provide open access. The last part of it, if the attic hatch is sealed, make sure you give permission to the inspector. That's not all inspectors. That's our company. We don't want to cut that unless we get permission. So we'll ask you if you're the buyer's licensee to call the listing licensee and get permission. Or if you're not there, then we'll try to get the permission from the listing licensee. It's rare that we're going to cut that just because. I'll cut it if it's kind of a terrible house. There's a lot wrong with it, and it really needs to see up in the attic. And I tried, and I can't get a hold of anybody. I'll cut it. But typically, home inspect, it's like 50-50. Some will just cut it automatically, and some won't. So let's see. And then be prepared on the day of the inspection. Obviously, you want your utilities on. I think the last on here, it's best to take any pets with you, but if you can, make sure they're safely created or otherwise secured. Oh, I would just really recommend you get rid of your dogs mostly, because that is so annoying. You might spend 20 to 30 minutes in a garage, and if that dog's barking the entire time. What?
You said you just want to get out of there.
Yeah, it's distracting, and I've gotten bit by a dog, and the people were just like, "Wow, he's never bit anybody." But yeah, he bit me. So, and then most of all, be ready at least 30 minutes before. I always get there 15 minutes before. So we usually do the roof first, so that nobody follows us up on the roof. That's happened before. So 30 minutes is probably, I don't know if any inspector that gets 30 minutes. Maybe there are. You guys know other inspectors that get. Yeah, most of it's 15. You want to get your tools, you want to get your ladder set up, you want to scope out the house with other inspections. We're almost always 15 minutes early. Okay, a lot of this bold type is Gina's questions about what I should cover in this class. So she wanted to know what type of inspections we do. Buyer's inspections, seller's inspections, they're one and the same. The state dictates how we're supposed to do inspections. There's no seller's inspection, there's no buyer's inspection. There's an inspection. And you have to follow their guidelines. You have to do a written report. So if you have a seller who says, "Hey, I just want to walk through, I just want an inspector to come through here and just point out stuff, and I'll write it down, and we don't want a written report, I don't want to disclose anything," you're kind of blurring the lines there a little bit. Inspectors will do it. Not saying you don't, they shouldn't do it. But if you're going to do a home inspection, you have to do a written report. So you're kind of sort of putting them on the line a little bit when you ask a home inspector to do something different than what the state tells you to do. Yeah. Okay, radon. So I've got a little PowerPoint here.
Can you explain what those pictures are? Because some people may not know what that is.
Yeah, so this is the infrared scans on this one. It's my camera cost $15,000 when I bought it. Very high-tech cameras that basically take a picture of heat. It's a heat signature. So you can get a cold signature or you get a hot signature. And typically you have to be trained, because sometimes, these are pretty obvious, but sometimes you can get false readings. You have to know what that's all about. Anyway, that's an infrared scan of heat loss on the top left. You can see all that red coming out through the roof, through the wall. Water leak on the top right, that's a flat roof. So you're not going to see that just by walking on it. You see this because the camera is not seeing water. You know what they're seeing there?
Temperature difference.
Because of water evaporation. So when water evaporates, it's just like if you get out of the shower, you feel a little cold because this water is kind of evaporating off your skin. Same thing's happening here. That's what the camera sees.
Is that like an extra add-on to the home inspection?
Almost always,
Okay.
yeah.
How much is that usually?
300. So what I usually do, if somebody wants a scan, I will bring it out at the very end and we'll just do a quick scan. But if you're going to hire me to do an infrared scan in your house, it's a lot more in depth. We do a lot more. We don't just walk around and look at this cool piece of equipment here. But you can see on a typical home inspection, this is all you're going to see, right? So let's say this is a vaulted ceiling, so you're not going to be able to get up there in an attic and see that typically. But all that was missing insulation, or it was falling down or something. So you're going to see that with an infrared scan.
It shouldn't be purple, it should be the yellow.
Okay. Escape?
They work great for in-floor heat to see if there's in-floor heat and concrete to see if there's a leak or where the leak
Absolutely,
is.
yeah. Where am I going here, Gina? PowerPoint?
Yes. And then you can click on,
This one?
yes.
How often do you see this?
Stephen King.
So is this going to keep going, or do I have to?
Yeah, no, yeah.
That is, how often do you see that?
Quite often.
It's just-
What's that, George?
Saw the pictures in there, just
Oh,
flying through the beam.
Quit jumping ahead, George.
Sorry.
Okay, so radon in Alaska, since when? Anybody have any experience with radon?
Yes.
You did? So we've been doing radon testing for 7-8 years now. And it was hit or miss. Most inspectors said, you can buy one, but you're never going to pay for it. They're $1,200 or $1,300 or something. But it has exploded. And you're going to see it. So that's why I wanted to include it in this, because especially younger buyers, or especially out-of-state buyers, they're really savvy about this radon stuff. And they're all asking for it. So you're going to see it. It's going to complicate all your transactions now if it comes back as big. So what is it?
Do you think it got worse after the earthquake too?
No, it doesn't get worse, but what it could do is you had a radon test 5 years ago and you were completely good.
Yeah.
The earthquake moved everything around and that radon now comes over to underneath your house.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So the EPA recommends a radon test after a big seismic event or every time a house sells. So this is from the EPA. What's radon? Radon is a gas you can't see, smell, or taste. It can be dangerous. It's the second leading cause of lung cancer in the U.S. It does take 20 years of breathing radon to get lung cancer. But if you live in a house for even 6 months, I would want to know. So where's Alaska on that list, do you think, as far as states with high radon?
It's up there.
We're high.
Alaska has the highest level of radon. So guess who knows this? All your buyers from out of state, all your young people, they know this and they are getting this test. Home Team is another, Rex Lewis is a friend of mine and we convince all the time. He's never done as much radon testing and we have never done as much radon testing as this last year.
Kevin does it too, Kevin Jones.
Kevin
I don't know
Jones?
what his experience has been lately, but
Most inspectors who've been doing it for a while in town, they have a machine or two.
I think the interesting thing that maybe some people don't know is you can have one house that has it and the one next door does not. So it's not necessarily like wide,
Area.
huge, ginormous areas. So that's the interesting
right,
thing about it too.
That's why the EPA is recommending every house when it's sold, get tested. And I forgot the article, but Dave Windsor, is he Jack White?
No, he's at Remax.
Remax. You guys know who Dave Windsor is? Long time.
Yeah, yeah, he has an accent.
Yeah. He writes all these blogs for the paper. And Friday, he wrote one about radon for Alaska, if you're interested. This is all the same stuff. According to the Alaska Division of Public Health, radon is an under-recognized health risk in the state.
So if you have radon, that's interesting. You have radon and you smoke. Bad combination.
Small children, older adults, all that's really bad.
Wow.
So this is just a map I got off the internet, but we're in, this is a little hard to understand, but we're in zone 2 and 3, not zone 1. So there's no zone 1 on this map. Okay. So if you have over 4 picocuries, it's called, then you have to have a radon mitigation system installed. That's the standard, picocuries, 4 picocuries.
How much is one of these systems on average?
What's that?
Radon.
He's
Oh, the
gonna go
mitigation?
through it.
Oh yeah, that's coming up.
I saw a house with 10. I saw a house with 10.
Oh, wow.
So we just did one 6 months ago, 20. And guess where it was? Any idea?
South Anchorage.
Was it in Anchorage? Anchorage?
Yeah, it was in Anchorage where we're not supposed to have any.
Oh,
It was in Airport Heights,
oh,
slab on grade,
wow. Oh, no crawl space or anything.
20.
How's it getting up?
Cracks in the concrete.
So are you familiar with those slabs? There's a government housing complex. And they poured all these foundations with cardboard baffles. And they made channels in the slab that went back to the furnace. And that's your ducting, basically,
Oh
these
my.
square ducts. And yeah, New Naka Valley. So if you pull up those cardboard on the bottom, you can see the ground underneath. There's so many ways for radon to get up in those houses. It's crazy. So many ways.
Yeah, I did hear that, like, that was happening, that happened in the Napa Valley too, and whatever's in there, it actually goes, it's not only is it coming up through the foundation, but it's literally going through the furnace and blowing through the house, because it's part of the heating system.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So if it's 20, I mean, that's just really dangerous.
Yeah.
The World Health Organization recommends buildings with radon levels of 2.7 picocuries or greater, but we go by the EPA recommendation. So 2.7, we see that a lot. So, but 4.0, we really don't see that much of it. If you get out to Eagle River, Upper Hillside, Palmer Wasilla, you're going to see about 4. But in the Anchorage Bowl, it's really rare to see 20. I mean, that's just like over the top. So all this information is from this EPA website. And at the end of this slideshow, there's another radon website that's really good. So the EPA recommends that you know what the radon level is in any home you consider buying. This is our testing that we use, this testing equipment, Everything's Pro. It's roughly $175, and it's expensive because we drop it off, we have to come back and read it in 48 hours, but you get the results within your due diligence period. You can also, and we send an email out saying this, you can also go to the big box stores, you go for $15. It's a charcoal-based test. You put it in an appropriate place, you come back, you mail it in, you're just hoping it gets back within your due diligence period. So we just offer this service. We tell them that the EPA recommends it. It's totally up to them if they want to do a $15 test. They're not as reliable. That's the other thing. But it's coming for all of you. Yeah.
So we had one that you recently did a radon test on, and the house was occupied. And I was reading through, I think it was like what to expect, what the seller needed to prepare for, and it was like mostly keep the windows closed and the fans off and all of that. How often does someone not doing that, I mean, or would you even know, like mess up the results, or is it a lot harder when someone's living there to get clear readings? I don't know. Because I was curious about that.
Right. So Christy is referring to a handout we leave with the seller. Say, do not do this, do not do this, do not do this. You can do this. You can come and go. You can take a shower, turn the fan on, but you just turn all that off when you're done. Don't leave the window open. You sleep at night with the window open. Don't do that for 48 hours. We've had tests where it's 80 degrees. Well, there's no way.
Right.
The person's
That's
like,
what I was thinking.
no. You have to come back. Do something. So
Doesn't it give you an error or a fail on your test if they do
exactly,
that?
yeah. That test, that equipment that we have will give an error message that it's been moved, it's not accurate.
Where do you place the equipment at?
So you're supposed to put it in the lowest portion of the living space. So you put it in a basement, but you don't put it in a crawl space. Same thing for this.
Bailey?
Oh, sorry.
How does it work when they are over the limit? Because you just did one for me too, and they were under the mitigation limit. But like, for instance, your report on a home inspection, you say, you know, what needs to be done, or not what needs to be done, but what they need to do, so we can write it in our repair amendment. So how does that work when they're over the limit? Do you provide some kind of information on what needs to be done as a realtor? Because you sent me that, I could not read the report, but I knew they were in the grid, you know, like, because it's a bunch of lines and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And so it's a little different because you send it to a different company, right? And then they send it to us. Is that
It's
who
just,
reads it?
it's just the AirPro software.
Okay,
It creates the report, and I just forward that to you.
okay,
But to answer your question, it's super difficult.
okay,
And we're going to get to why it's difficult here in a second. But
okay.
well, let's get to that.
Sorry.
So,
There it is, next slide.
Contact a professional, easier said than done in Alaska. So Alaska does not currently require professional licensing, nor does it require professional certification. You have to have a business license.
50 bucks and then you need.
So this is where it gets sticky. We did one in Wasilla 8 months ago, came back high. The buyer wanted guaranteed results. That if they spent $5,000 on a mitigation system, it was going to come back under the federal guidelines. They couldn't find anybody in the state that would guarantee their work. They went out to Wyoming. $10,000 it cost them to bring up somebody to put a mitigation system.
Was it any different than the mitigation system that somebody here would have used?
No, it was because they had to pay somebody that would guarantee their results. And they would bring them up from the lower 48. They had to bring them up, pay their have to pay their.
Yeah, hotel, everything.
So that was 10 grand, but they wanted the guaranteed results. So what we recommend is after you do the mitigation, then you have it retested. At least have it retested, so you know. Maybe people don't stand by their work up here, but if it comes back at high again, then you're going to, it seems like there would be a lot of pushback you could do with that mitigator. But we're not recommending anybody. If you call us and say, okay, silly home inspector, yeah, it's high, what do we do? Google it. We really don't want to be on the hook to say, hey, these guys will do it, and then they don't stand by
So
their
why
word.
wouldn't somebody be doing that? Like, why wouldn't, if nobody's doing it, don't you think that's something somebody could capitalize on? Is it not something that can be guaranteed, that you can get rid of it and mitigate it?
I'm not sure why people aren't guaranteed. If you have a house that's 20 Seco Curries, and it's a slab on grade,
Yeah, like,
And
are
it
you
has
supposed to
holes
put
in
any of this in something like that?
what's
In
that?
Like the mitigation system, like how would you put that in? Doesn't it go down in the crawl space? Yeah, there's no crawl space, like,
That's where it's more difficult, I think. Yeah.
Yeah.
If it's
Well,
in a
that's-
crawl space, it's easier to
Right.
contain. If it's going through your heating system, a different story.
Yeah, I think it's probably a case-by-case basis. This was new construction where they had to bring somebody in. So I don't know why that wasn't. Yeah, so the mitigation systems, this is with the crawl space. You can see that the pipe runs underneath. It's a perforated pipe at the bottom, see that? And then your crawl space vapor barrier is sealed to your foundation. So when that fan runs, this fan on the exterior here, when that runs, it depressurizes this entire area. And the radon gets gathered up in that perforated pipe, and then it goes above the roof. That's the idea. And that runs 24/7 for the life of the building. Those fans are really good, actually, they last a long time. So for a basement, you'd basically be doing the same thing. The only thing that's not showing here is this is a reservoir that they've dug. It actually is usually a lot bigger. You dig, you basically drill a hole in the slab, which would be awfully hard to do if you had in-floor heat. But you drill a hole in the slab and you create a reservoir down there so that when you do put your pipe in and seal it to the slab and you turn your fan on, then that depressurizes your basement. All the radon sucks down to that and then goes out. You can also have, as I do in my house, and I live in South Diamond area where there's not supposed to be any radon. I had to put one in my own house. And I have a crawl space and a basement. So it just gets more and more complicated the more issues you come up with.
who did you use to put your system in?
You're looking at
He did.
And I guarantee my results. Okay, so that's kind of what it looks like on the exterior. They're not exciting, they're not good to look at.
So when you're walking around a house and you see that, now you know. what
Yeah.
it
Yeah, now I know
is.
what
So get a rate on
So
this.
symbol of health.
Yes,
Yeah.
if it's running, you want to make sure it's running.
I just don't understand why it's not a bigger deal if it's such a big deal. And why would you
We're
want
the
to
highest
like
level and allow
Yeah.
PA if we're the highest, why is nobody making a bigger deal out of it? I
Well,
mean, we're
I-
still dealing with lead-based paint from 19, like,
Mhm.
what's the,
I think because it's still a relatively small issue where the majority of the population is. So if you ask most of the old guard at Jack White, is radon an issue? Almost every single one's going to say, no, radon, we don't have any radon. But as a collective, you take Fairbanks, you take Kenai, you take the whole population or the whole state as where the radon is, it's the highest.
Crazy.
Okay, so typical cost, you're looking at 1,500 to 5,000. Installation 1 to 4 days. The fan life is 7 to 10 years, and really those are only $300 anyway. They're not that expensive. And the PVC life is 50 to 70 years. Probably the life of the building. Probably wouldn't have to choose out PVC. But that's just off the internet. So just when you had radon dialed in your house,
Yeah.
there is radon in water.
Oh, wow.
So if you have a well, we don't do radon testing in the water. I really don't know who does. I don't think on a COSA,
No,
they don't do radon.
no. I don't even know Alaska Pure Water adds that to theirs. I know they do a lot of different testing for water, but I don't remember seeing radon.
Yeah, I don't think they do.
So you could be drinking and have no idea.
But from the EPA website, if you've tested for radon in air and have elevated radon levels, and your water comes from a private well, have your water. That's from
Yeah,
the
that
EPA.
makes sense. Because it's coming out of the ground, and that's where your water is coming from as well. So
Mhm.
most likely it's contaminated too.
Yeah.
I wonder if the reverse osmosis filter would take out radon.
I don't believe so.
How would you mitigate it out of water? Any idea?
I haven't even looked into it.
It's a gas, right? Like,
Yeah.
It is.
It's like-
how would it mix in the liquid and stay there?
Also, maybe the reverse osmosis. Well, but they don't have a way to purge gas out of that system.
yeah,
So that's an hour. Do you want to take a break?
Yeah, let's take like 15-minute break, 10-minute break.
And these are really good
Still hunt some radon,
websites. When your seller says, where does this inspector get all of his information and what, Alaska Radon's a really good one, or the EPA website.
We'll do 10 minutes, so at 11:10, 11:12. Come back.
Go back to escape.
Then you can, the little swirly thing at the bottom goes back to the other one, the PDF, the little swirl.
Next day, not one person came through.
There you go.
Yeah.
Perfect.
And they do see they apply to you with the
Yeah,
right?
since then I sat on
Something.
open house
Yeah, that.
and I only had
And then you
three
go
total
to
people
the
come from my open house in
Really?
the last.
Wow.
And he got 3 in one day, and he got work somebody at the same house I sat on Saturday. It's just random.
Oh, yeah,
You
dude.
never know.
Yeah.
I've been getting stung so hard.
I got a new listing on the home.
It works.
Well, whatever. No. At, as far as, anyway, I'm in.
Yeah, it's weird. Some days you get 5 or 6, have good walk
Can I get you
through
a
it.
coffee downstairs?
You know,
No, but you can put me
Yeah.
through the.
Oh, well.
you just,
And what's the house? It's a nice house.
oh,
Your nice house.
yeah,
Yeah.
the one I'm sitting, it's pretty good. It's in the medium market right there. I think it's 360, but it's like
But what happened was.
4 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms. It's pretty good.
Our garage,
Right there on 72nd. Should be.
I had
Oh,
no
yeah.
idea. They were
Should be
radon tests.
having good
My
walk
Good
license
area.
on me, I
You know,
had
Zach
no
could go
idea
walk through,
So
but I was
David just
expecting,
like.
5 or 6 groups to come through on Saturday.
There
Only
was,
2
they were left that handout,
the whole
right, so
time.
I wasn't able to do.
Yeah, yeah, but that's kind of where it is. Unfortunately. Mine's up in Muldoon, and it's a 4-bedroom, 4-bedroom with a, but it's older. 4-bedroom, I mean, RV.
Yeah, and I had, I think there was something like my.
I got one of
Like
these
there's
something
something
about
about
that.
chairs and the clients running.
Yeah. Open
We're like,
that.
or no, not my
You
favorite.
get
You
lost.
sit down and clients are running on the side.
Yeah,
I'm just
well,
so sensitive to like noise.
Well, we're just gonna have one house.
Yeah,
Yeah, we're just gonna have one house.
Like that's the stuff that are like.
From 7 to our,
doesn't really make.
I
But-
think you
but
did.
the-
And I only had one training.
They're awesome.
Oh, they are,
That's
they
what I was
are,
like,
they really are, they've been doing this ever since they started.
Because he said that
So
I
they
had
have got
Yes.
maybe a lot of business.
And I had thought, I
That's what they do. Oh, yeah, during the weekend, that's what he said.
Tuesday.
And so he said Wednesday, so he said
No,
one
we
night.
just have
And then I
to
got
and I
one
had to
going,
take him on the leash.
Saturday.
He will go cruise around if I don't, you know.
So just get some people in there, you know what I mean?
Oh.
Yeah.
But they, it doesn't
I mean, I
help
feel
their,
like
your price too high. My
This dog.
CMA thing on it, reset.
Oh, really?
I don't think I got a handout.
So like,
The
right.
seller,
I'm
you
not
know,
supposed to be
left it
there. I don't like to take
And
no
we
one
do
to
the doors.
go on that with the people that mess with that.
I
know mine do feel good, and I feel
Okay, so, yeah, so, okay, so we're, yeah, but, and that's good. And so now, what we did is we're like, so I had
Okay.
275.
Supposed to go, you know, eat lunch.
Yeah.
You know, hey, 375. And so I said, this is what it is.
You know, that's what you gotta say, these are the people who should be like coaching their clients on what's to negotiate. That's what they're saying.
That's where they are.
So, yeah, I guess it, you know, on that price.
Okay. Yeah, that's why I think we went.
Thousands.
Yeah, that's good, because
Well,
Alaska, I don't
a
think it makes
thousand,
sense for
right.
a state
Yeah,
out
you
here.
see, you
Make
see.
or break.
It is.
Oh, so
And
you
it's
have
just
to
gonna go
put
down
everything-
there,
So
too.
do you
Yeah.
tell your clients
You know,
about,
it's gonna
like,
go
to get
down there.
radon testing now? I mean, after this, would you? Or would you?
And also,
Similar
I am
to situation.
Yeah, you just have to, you know, they have their.
Mhm.
Over there on 72nd.
Sure.
They just carpets, man,
Oh, yeah.
so bad. They went under contract, it fell through
Yeah.
twice.
I would think that too, I'm like,
Carpet.
Just
that's
because
10 years, like, I've had
Yeah,
one
so
lung cancer.
finally they.
Yeah, so
I got 10 years left, and if I'm breathing it, I just made it more work.
And then it's still
I'm
in
like,
the wall.
well, you
It's rough enough shape, like, you know, still at like,
Right, yeah.
I think
so they
the
probably
radar
had
for
like
a
some
lot.
great names or some great pit bulls.
In
There's
fact,
something.
And so the
Like,
smell,
I said, like,
too.
Yeah.
That smell of that can't sell it.
I
That
live
is just
in
hard to
Minnesota.
say.
It is.
You know what I mean?
You know, first time I sat there,
It's just like,
June, it
when
was
you
so
get
hot.
you know, when
Man, I was
you're
getting
in it,
nauseous.
a lot shorter, just
I've never smelled such musty dogs in my life.
Yeah, that's hard. And then-
Good times, thanks for talking to me, Christy, I was like, well, we both have radon tests.
The-
Like,
before
fast,
people
yeah.
say, because these people might want to, well, it's just to rip your carpet. I need a, like an earth tone carpet. Everybody,
Yes.
everybody likes it. And then too, you know, it's just one of those things. Paint, you know, paint $10 $1,000.
Yeah.
Okay, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And you can paint it, but they could.
the listing. like
So
this.
it is what it is. So, yeah, well,
Yeah, that's the hard
Well,
thing.
I mean,
You know, especially if
it
they're
is what
selling,
it
they might
is.
have-
well, they're selling and they're good neighbors.
Yeah.
You know, and they're, you know, it's just, this is.
It's hard for them to decide, come together to decide on these
Well,
things.
they're very good at that.
Oh, really?
They've
Because
been
you
very
said
good at
you
that.
tell
And they
people
get
about
along.
radon.
He said, they told me,
Or
"Sure,
they, or their buyer, or the buyer
it's
wants
that
it.
other
I
way
haven't even seen
to,
it.
you know, we're trying to. do
So it's not
together.
so nasty.
So it's not a nasty,
Okay.
yeah, it's not a
And I
nasty.
can understand their.
Well, that's good, that's
Yeah.
helpful.
It is, yeah.
Unethical
Super helpful.
Yeah.
I can see how
to not
Oh, that would
allow
be.
it.
if you're trying to work
Yeah,
out
that's
two
it.
sides.
Yeah.
Someone has a right not to
Yeah,
allow.
that, you know, whatever. it's
Right,
Yeah.
and,
dangerous
but if
or
they say,
whatever.
I'm not gonna allow you to check for
So
radon,
it's
the
a
buyer's
tough
big
situation.
giant red flags.
Mm-hmm, yeah, so.
Swing in
And they
and
got
be
two
like,
beautiful
I
daughters
don't
and
know.
stuff like that. So they're trying to get this
Yeah,
done,
and you
but
know,
they want,
Yeah,
they
yeah.
for sure do. They want out, so.
For sure.
Yeah.
This season.
We'll see.
Because you offer
All right.
Well, cool. Yeah, I need to start.
Why would you put that in writing? Because that seems really difficult.
It is.
Did you just, sorry, I don't mean to interrupt, were you just talking about how a seller didn't allow radon testing, is that what you were just saying?
Yeah.
Because I was gonna ask you, like, from the contract perspective,
Mhm.
you did a radon testing for me, you had sent something to my client, they scheduled with you, I didn't know until the agent had texted me that it was there.
Oh,
And so I was wondering if it's part of the regular due diligence period, or is it that one of those inspections where I have to ask for permission of the seller?
Well, if you already
before-
have, Dave written in as inspecting the property,
Uh-huh,
and they bring radon.
And they've been doing really good.
Okay. because I didn't have it pre-approved, so I didn't know
I
if
mean,
that
you
was
don't
part
have
of
to
it.
say, David Mortensen just for home inspection, David Mortensen for radon.
Right,
I mean, the buyer has the right to inspect everything they want to inspect.
Yeah, they are.
okay, I was
And
wondering.
as long as you say, I allow this person in my house to do inspections, it's whatever inspection.
And he does infrared home inspection, all these
Yeah.
things, then we're approved, and that should have been their job to check that if they didn't want it, correct? Is that how we would kind of
Yeah,
approach
but
it?
like, I mean, yes.
Okay, sorry, I just wasn't sure, because I know there's weird things where we can't inspect without certain permission, like more thoroughly without the seller's permission.
Yeah, it has to, they have the right to approve who's coming into their house.
Got it.
For an inspection.
Okay,
So, but they're not supposed to, deny it, they're supposed to not unreasonably deny it,
got it, okay.
is
I'm
essentially how
usually
it
not
works.
on that list. Do not allow, but I am now on some because of the
Well, there's several people who do radon testing, so they're all over it.
almost everybody.
I don't know. In my opinion, I want a thorough inspection, period. And
I mean, our
deal with whatever it
properties
is that
falling
comes.
apart,
Yeah.
if there is radon, and then nobody knows that's mitigation.
Oh, so he's
There is
That's
mitigation. I
great.
mean, if people who do it, intake.
Oh, but these people that you were referring to were just like super, they wanted 100% guarantee.
Yeah.
It is in that big spiel where it says.
Here's all the things that's why.
But yeah, no,
And then the
I mean, I don't know. I have a different philosophy with that. Some people are like, that I would not allow.
Why would he take care of this?
Well,
We can negotiate that. I mean, it's.
There are.
I know, like,
Nobody.
Nobody.
I literally go in there like,
Oh, no, but that too.
I just-
Oh, okay.
And like,
It's like,
you
oh,
can go to the again, and get like $5 a year.
Chores at my house.
Maybe don't.
I said, I was like,
Yeah.
like, my dad, I said, and then I
I like
that.
Took one right when I started. They get covered, I get to it, and the weird thing is, one of my buddies down. He was like, yeah, man, he's like, I tested positive for
That's
COVID,
why I'm like,
blah, blah, blah.
you do it, you buy my.
But that's.
I don't know
And
what I
there's
had.
this whole community too, where I know last
Longer
week, every Sunday, because it was like, and they're expensive, and yeah, you can only spend like, goddamn, and there's a whole.
I feel like I don't know.
I'm not gonna.
Oh, yeah, it's big, like, Chicago, there's huge, like.
Well,
And you can choose to hold minimum open storage.
I don't think I can live with Yeah, COVID is.
Yeah, and they're fast, and they're, especially like, it's a particular very common accident. You're like, they're sharp, you can get hit in the eye, like, you're so fast.
Yeah.
Plastic bag and put it on and duct tape them up or something.
March 2020 all over again.
Right.
Yeah,
But we usually wait for like, if you just wait for the.
It's over
Yeah, I'm not. That's why I let them buy.
I was super duper.
Okay, so how does Bootcamp day 10?
Oh,
not
yeah.
me, I was like,
Really?
Yeah, you guys are going over a CMA on a house in Sonora.
Oh, hey. Let me see what's going on, because it's live right now.
Analysis.
oh, we're like taking full shit, we were busier than ever. Taking out all the chefs, all the chefs did was start doing takeout.
Anybody that
Then when business picked up, and we started getting all the regulars coming again, they were still doing just as much business as takeout. So then, ultimately, the kitchen is way busier than they would have been before or after.
Trees
The chefs making all this money, not paying anybody more, working harder. I was getting sick of it.
And then there's these marks where you can say, well,
You can't tell them.
it's
It's
really
good
good.
events. You're literally.
I've never been, my
money
biggest part
go
is the one time in one day where I was chased out by an hourly bear.
Take out and the restaurants.
In one day.
back,
Oh, yeah.
And,
Yeah, like essentially you
we're
guys.
in fine dining, and you won't pay me $20
Was
an
it
hour.
on live?
It's supposed to be good, like, and it lies, you can look it up on Facebook, how much fine dining trips, maybe it's just.
But yeah, no, I don't think so.
I know, I put real pants on.
I don't know.
I'm growing up.
All these chefs in town trying to.
I'm the real boy.
16,
Sorry.
Yeah,
It's crazy.
I could literally go to McDonald's.
WB, I ran into
Right,
you.
go to. Did you? TGI Fridays or any of these places.
Do it.
Make the same amount of money as working at Casey's or a Southside restaurant. It's insane.
Oh,
So, yeah.
So.
No, it's good. He was probably the coolest. You were.
Like my go-to place for like
And I gotta say, as far as this feeling is, that's not food safety,
Yeah.
being super.
She definitely got that perfect service. Yeah. Oh yeah, no, I'm just gonna tie around. Yeah, there's such a stark difference between how they operate and like what they're willing to get away with.
So.
On the floor and then shake it up and like put it in the fryer and
They're like,
you
that
know,
kills
sanitize it and then serve it to somebody. And that's the owner, chef owner. I'm not gonna tell him like, whatever, dude, like that's the just weird stuff, man. So.
All right, everybody, let's go ahead and get started again.
I just like we're ready.
He's an old guy.
I know. he'll come in ready. All right, go.
All right. Any questions on that radon stuff?
So the test is only 125?
175.
175.
And then you said there wasn't somebody certified to install the systems in Alaska yet?
Not that I know of. Well, no, I think what the slide said was it's not needed.
You don't
Oh,
have
it's
to
not
have
yet.
a certification.
There might be some certified radon mitigation installers, but I don't know.
There are people who do it. I know Christina Klebman just had someone who had one installed in her house.
Okay.
So I do know there's someone who does it, but I'm not sure the name of it.
I want to get a test now. I'm scared. And I'm like, I don't want to buy a $5,000 system.
You want lung cancer?
No.
Okay.
That's why.
Yeah, just think about the price of lung cancer.
I just want to booze.
I just, well,
Yeah,
once you know, you know.
Yes.
You might as well get the mitigation
Well,
system and live
you
there.
said it was counting, you said government housing or low income development. I'm in Cook Inlet built like townhouses, so that's why I'm on parent now.
You're what?
Oh, no, it's not
No.
just government housing.
No.
It all has to do
Oh, no,
with-
I know in all housing, but the one where you found it, you said they had put like the cardboard in there.
Like a 1950s built house, right? Those
Yeah.
But that,
okay.
you said also in
Exactly.
Napa Valley, and
They're
that's very similar. to
built in the
Newport Heights
50s and
also.
60s. Yeah. They're those really old little
1950s.
houses. Yep.
Really difficult foundation to stop.
Yeah,
damage.
Right.
because it goes in the heating system. I don't know what they would do there.
$5 to $15 test will be a peace of mind.
Yeah.
If it comes back high, I would probably hire a home inspector with a better equipment.
We're all gonna be going to Home Depot after this.
Well, that's the other thing is, it's still relatively small amounts in acreage bulk. Not until you get to the upper hillside,
So what was the level on your house?
5.
Okay. So what is it? It's just like a gas that is in the ground normally like any other natural gas, and it just tends to be high in Alaska.
It's the naturally occurring radioactive gas from deteriorating uranium.
Oh,
That sounds way more scary.
Why do we have so much uranium in the ground?
Or uranium,
Plutonium, whatever it is.
it's granite.
Yeah.
No,
Doesn't Adak Island have like crazy radioactive because of all the stuff that was buried there? Like there's an area that you're not even supposed to fly over.
Oh my God.
Yeah, it's on a map.
It's when you Google what radon is, it says it's a chemical element of atomic number 86, a rare radioactive gas belonging to the noble gas series.
It's from deteriorating rock material, so wherever that occurs in the ground.
I'm surprised they haven't like harvested it and like turned it into something, you know?
It's got
I'm sure that there's probably some money in it, right?
Okay,
The next Bitcoin.
Yeah.
so we also do commercial inspections and infrared scans. There's people in town that do indoor air quality inspections, asbestos, lead-based paint, pest infestation, etc. So there's all sorts of inspections you can have done. The only person I know that was doing indoor air quality was Jim Foss, but he passed away. So I'm not sure who else. Do you know of anything?
Satori, I believe, it's not a home inspector, but it's
Oh.
a company called Satori. I believe they don't do tests, but they do all the other ones.
Asbestos, lead-based paint, it's almost always a lab. that has
Yeah.
to test that stuff. If a home inspector says they do asbestos and lead-based paint, they're buying a $10 Home Depot, 50% accurate kind of test. So that's why we don't do it. They're just not very accurate. And pest infestation, definitely go with a
High
reputable
fiber.
company in town. Yeah.
Mhm.
Somebody, I mean, I think all home inspectors are gonna say, hey, you have mice droppings in your crawl space or behind your range or whatever, but they're not necessarily going to find entrance points and that sort of thing. Okay, I think you asked for this too, right? Yeah, so home maintenance tips for first-time home buyers. This is just something you could give to your clients after they buy their home.
And you go over where these things are during the inspection. So another reason for the buyer to be at the inspection,
Yes.
to show them all these things at the time. And they're not trying to figure out where they are after they own the home.
Right.
when there's a big water.
Yes, exactly.
Shut it off.
When their house is flooding and they have no idea where to turn the water off.
Discovery, our inspectors always take a picture of this stuff too. So even if you're not if your buyer doesn't attend the home inspection, they have a picture of where it's at. Circuit box is easy. Call before you dig. Check your foundation. Huge in acreage. Huge. It's water. Check your attic insulation. I'm not sure about that one, but we always try to evaluate the R value of the insulation. Recommend you should put more up there if needed.
It's like a common thing too, is like the bats, like if you have like a ton of wind, it gets like super, super, super windy. Sometimes it comes in and like knocks the bats down. You have like section of your attic that it all blew away, and that can be problems in the winter if you don't put that all back where it belongs. And
Especially in hillside.
yes.
Yeah. See that a lot.
Mhm.
If it's blowing insulation though, isn't it like when you're trying to open the hatch, it's all right there on top of it, correct or not?
No, it's
I
more
never-
what Gina's talking about. So if your house is on the downslope on the upper hillside, and all this wind's coming down. This eave, you know those cardboard baffles? So that eave gets all this wind coming up like this, and it kind of burbles all this insulation out of that area.
Right, no,
So
but
you-
I'm asking you as the inspector, when you go to open the hatch and it's, say, it's blowing insulation in the attic, like, is that over the hatch also? Like, how do you, isn't it sitting on the hatch, you just have to like dig your way up, or what?
No, I don't open those anymore.
Oh, okay.
I've been just, shower with insulation. It's not fun. Getting that all down your shirt and your eyes. If I start to open it and somebody's blowing it,
Okay, gotcha,
I don't know.
okay.
I put it back on the seller that they have to make it available for inspection.
Gotcha.
Usually the wind isn't going to blow that insulation she's talking about. All it does, it just
Right.
kind of humps it up in
Right.
one
Yeah.
spot. We talk about all this stuff at the inspection, so, but it's probably good to hand your client something. What else? Test your sump pump. Sump pumps, some sump pumps have an alarm on them you can buy. That's always a good. If we go into a crawl space that has a sump pump and it's obviously being needed, we will tell, especially a first-time home buyer, you should buy another pump with an alarm system. Check your fire extinguisher. You don't have to have a fire extinguisher in a house. But if you do, it's a good idea.
So do you guys know, like what you would put on, if you have a pan on the stove that has grease in it
Like,
and it catches on fire, what would you put on it?
flour.
Oh,
Not
flour,
water, not
not water,
blanket.
not water,
Yeah, water's
100%
not
water.
fire.
not water.
Kitchens, they started having these new things. They're like blankets specifically made for that, like Kevlar blankets. Like they'll put anything out, and also the heat won't radiate through. So
But you don't pick up the pan and try to throw it outside.
You can install an Ansel system, just to be really safe,
Yeah, right.
kitchens do.
But just things like that, people don't think about, especially if they're not like big cooks and they haven't cooked all their life. The first thing you think of is water and
so if you do have a
baking
fire,
soda, powdered flour, anything like that will help put it out.
except for like you can, like if you put out the fire with a blanket and stuff, you can then clean up and wipe up the grease. If you're throwing flour on your whole stove and range, then you got to shut down the whole restaurant and clean
Well, we're
it.
talking about a house.
Yeah, what even then? It's like you're done cooking. You're done cooking.
Fire, not the
He's
measurement.
working.
This sounds like a man with experience.
Yeah.
I feel like the blanket would be pretty messy too.
No, splash
Catches on
grease.
fire.
Yeah, it'll make you gotta wait for it to cool off a little bit. And then you just get some dish towels or some paper towels and wipe it up and keep doing your thing. But if your flour mixes in with boiling grease everywhere on your stove and range and floor, it's gonna be a nightmare, trust me.
Sounds like a clean boy.
Sound like you experienced this.
Yeah, things sometimes get a little hot in the kitchen.
So this is just, these next two pages are little diagrams about anatomy of a house. Gina thought you should know some of this stuff. I kind of feel like this is what the inspector should know. And
I'm talking about just for terms, because sometimes you, in the report, when you're writing up the report, you may say, there's the fascia needs, is missing paint, or like, what is a fascia?
exactly.
They just don't,
So
like, a lot of people, it came to my attention that a lot of people
it's
have
great.
no earthly idea what any of that stuff is
It's
or means.
amazing information for you to know, but are you really going to, this is just one little diagram of one exterior portion of a house. You start looking at everything else in the house that you have to know as a home inspector. It really becomes overwhelming. So my only point was, if I call out that there's a problem with the freeze board, I'm gonna have a picture of what a freeboard is in my report. And we are a company that anytime you don't understand something, or your client, or your seller, or the contractor, you can always call any of our inspectors. Okay, what the heck's a freeboard? Here it is. It's on page 12. This is what it does. This is what it's all about. There are inspectors in town that do not want to take a contractor's call, just so you know. But we're not one of them. So anyway, this is all really good information. Probably 90% of the stuff that comes up on an inspection comes up all the time. And it's only that other 10% that you're like, what is he talking about? So that's where the other 10% we're really trying to discern in the inspection report, making it easier for everybody to understand. Contractors are all going to know what we're talking about anyway, but I totally understand that it has to be understandable for the licensee and the client as well.
I guess the thing too that's new now, like I would say probably like in the last 5 years or so, we're seeing a lot of people come into real estate that are 20, 21, 22, that literally may even still live with their parents. And they don't even know what a GFCI is.
Right.
Like they've never had to do any kind of a home maintenance, never lived in a home by themselves, never lived by themselves at all. And they're selling homes. So that's the piece that a lot of people, like, especially like our age, were like, how do you not know that? Well, because we didn't start when we were 20, we started when we were 25 or something like that. So it's just a younger generation starting this career that don't have the experience for like things we think are like simple, like you say a light switch plate. They're like, what is a light switch plate? And like literally, they don't know what GFCI is. Things that we all know easy, they may not even know what that is.
Definitely
So
find that company that
help.
caters to that for sure. Especially some of the older inspectors in town.
Yeah.
Some of their reports are 7, 8 pages long and full of technical stuff.
When you get an engineer to write a report, you won't have a clue what it's about. Yeah.
So anyway, there's all sorts of this kind of stuff on the internet. You need to follow up on stuff, but I think the takeaway for me is just call us.
Yeah.
We'll apologize for being too technical. And we'll try to make it more easy to understand. So what you look for, soil draining away from the home. Why are there 45% of the homes in acreage with water draining towards the house? Maybe not that high, but it's all the time. It's been a code forever. The municipality looks the other way. You see it all the time. You guys that have been selling real estate, it comes up all the time. You should do something about this. Oh, really? We should get an excavator and for $30,000, we should drain this away. No, no one's going to do that. But you're going to end up with water in your house, unfortunately. So that comes up all the time. Same thing with cracks in cement. This bottom one is a garage with a slab built, is a crawl space with a garage built on top of it. This was really common in the late 70s, early 80s, and then they all started caving in. So the municipality has a handout that says if you're going to do this, it's a prescriptive method, it's called. You can build these crawl spaces, or these garages over crawl spaces, but they have to be 2x12 dimensional lumber, spaced every 12 inches, and they have all these parameters for it because they built one and it actually held up an SUV and whatever else you put in the garage. And so now they say, if you're going to do it, this is how you have to do it. Doesn't mean you can't do it differently, but if you do it differently, it has to be engineered. Okay? So if we go into a crawl space that looks like this, it looks really good, but it's not 2x12 on center, 12-inch spacing. We're going to call it out. even though we don't see anything wrong with it. So that,
Just because it's the code.
just because the Muni has taken a stand on it and says there was too many falling apart, cars were going into crawl spaces.
Yeah, in Ocean View, that happened to a listing I'm sitting, their neighbor had that happen, like, not too long ago, like the last year or something. Just
Yeah.
Collapse.
Well,
It's a
the,
nightmare.
the problem that happens that too is the asphalt goes up to the slab of the garage, and then underneath that garage, of course, is plywood. And so that doesn't stay sealed because your asphalt moves all the time. And so water gets there and it gets underneath there and it rots the plywood, and
Water. Yep.
then you have your issue.
Literally needing to survive, but it's very.
Oh, it's the worst. It is the worst.
What we see also is something called engineered floor joists. You know what those are? They're like a steel I-beam. They have a top and a bottom chord and then a piece in the middle. Super, really good, awesome construction. Makes the floor super straight, strong, no squeaks. They're incredible. But they can't get wet. So you put those under a garage and it gets wet, it's coming down. So we see this all the time. So even though there's nothing wrong, and you're gonna get so frustrated with the home inspector, there's nothing wrong. I know, but if we don't tell your client that this isn't allowed anymore, guess who's gonna get the call if that ever gets wet and caves in? So this comes up all the time. That was a good example of that. This is another one. We see this, I see this at least monthly, sometimes every couple weeks. So it looks harmless, right?
No.
The problem is it's an engineered beam that's holding up the second story. And usually there's roof loading on top of that. There's all sorts of weight that could be on. If you cut the bottom out of a beam, you've completely destroyed it. So as soon as that reaches that level, it's coming down. The whole house is coming down. It's a really,
You see that specific problem very often? Wow, I don't think I've ever seen that
all the
before.
time.
Is this the sellers doing this in their own homes, or they're being purchased like?
This is a seller that could have done that 10 years ago, 3 buyers ago. And whoever the home inspector was didn't call it out as an issue. This is super, you can imagine what that might cost if they had to replace the beam.
So that's just gonna ask, could you even replace it? You
Yeah.
have to rip
You
the
can.
whole house
Oh,
apart.
is anything possible?
So what happens is, we call this out for an engineer, the engineer goes in and they make the call. Okay, this is too destroyed, we have to replace the beam. They specify the repair. Or what we typically see is 2 pieces of 3/8 steel that is as tall as the beam, this tall, starts here, goes all the way past. There's one on the other side, and then you clamp it together. You get rid of this whole thing here.
Create like a steel gusset that like
Yeah.
wraps around it.
Yep. And you put a garage door that rolls up on the side. You don't cut the structural beam.
I've noticed a lot of it's like where they drill the hole right in the middle to put in like that'll make it structurally unsound too, right? Because you're ruining the fulcrum of the actual weight.
You cannot drill.
Touch it.
notch.
Yeah.
Don't touch it.
So you see it all like the drill in the middle, you'll see it, or that, and you just looking at it, you're like, that is horrible. Yeah.
Yeah.
This is a pretty common one.
Dude, duct
Some-
tape
Duct tape,
works
yeah.
for everything, right? Even plumbing.
Sometimes it's super easy. Sometimes that scares a buyer like you would believe. Like, wait, realistically, it's $30 worth of PVC. It has to be redone. It's not really a big deal. But water problems is the biggest. Lack of sump pump issues, microbial growth. You know why we call it microbial growth instead of
black
scares
mold or
people.
mold or whatever, because you don't know what it is.
Look at one and say it's toxic.
So what is your so something like that, what would be, I mean, you could definitely see there's some kind of growth there. You'd have to pull the floor up and see if it goes under the floor or go into the crawl space and see if it's there, if you can get underneath that, I'm assuming.
So what we do is we always want to back up what our recommendation is by a reputable source.
Right.
So we're going to say, according to the EPA,
Okay.
you have to remove all porous materials with microbial growth. But if you go to a remediation company, say that's really bad and it's gone down, it's the whole crawl space is full of mold or
Yeah.
microbial growth, there's a lot of damage and they have to get a remediation company in there, they're going to kill it.
Mhm.
And that's all the insurance company wants them to do. If they've, taken care of any deteriorating structural problems.
Once the water's not still leaking and all that.
So our recommendation is based on
EPA.
something else. But the remediation company, they just have to do what the insurance company tells them.
And it's just one of those things where it doesn't cost much to call your contractor or anybody. Like I'm doing one on one of my units. But it's something like that where the seller, the previous owner of the building, who was a plumber, mind you, did something like this. And so I got a call that there was leaking and I went down and I looked at it. And immediately I just called my contractors and they come out. And then that's the first thing that they noticed, the janky setup and how that it was the mixing valves. They basically, whoever put it in didn't put it in a right position where it was easy access and stuff, which meant that they had to cut out behind and then they found, like mildew. And so right now, it's basically turned into, if the person would have fixed it properly and called the contractor, it would have probably cost, $200 to take care of it. Instead, it's costing me $1,500 because they're gonna have to rip out everything, do the microbial spray, and then remove all of the wood. And luckily, it's on a ground unit, so it's concrete slab, but it's still just a back there.
Did you have a home inspection?
I did, and that was, I think brought this up before, is it was one of those things where the inspector was like the real estate agent, and I don't name names, but they were like buddy, and so the inspector was just trying to make sure that the seller could get a sale. And so now, like, that's one of those things where, I tell my clients, do your due diligence, find, like, I will give you references to who I trust, but,
Regular home inspector should not do what someone asked them to do to get a sale.
they should have seen that. Like, it's one of those things where, and I was walking with him, and he was kind of like going underneath, and he was just very nonchalant, like, this will need to be taken care of a little bit later. And of course, he wasn't there, like, I didn't pay for the scope to like see if there was water damage or anything like that. I kind of just trusted the agent to let me know, which was my fault. So. Yeah.
Never trust agents.
Yeah.
Or a home
that
inspector.
particular, you can trust me with your life. Like, I will shoot you straight. But don't trust that agent. Yeah.
So the number one, water. Number two, electrical deficiencies. There are some inspectors who don't open electrical panels. Have you guys run across that?
No.
There is a panel that I don't open. It's called a Federal Pacific. They're terrible. Crappy. They should all be removed. But there hasn't been a recall, so I can't make that recommendation. But I do put in the report, I'm not opening this panel because when you do, you actually can pull the breakers off the bus, which leads to all sorts of problems. So
Is this an older panel?
it's an old panel,
It's old.
70s.
Okay.
Yeah. But that's the only one. But I do know a few inspectors that will not open them. And it's usually because they've opened them and they've gotten shocked or they, whatever. That's the other thing about the state statute. You don't have to do anything you feel is dangerous to yourself or anybody else, or you feel it's going to damage the property or anything like that. So if you feel like it's not safe for you to open the panel, you don't have to open the panel or go open it on the roof. Anyway, electrical comes up all the time. Deck is probably the third biggest item lately, and that's because the code has changed. There wasn't really any deck code for many years, and now it's gotten really stringent. So deck issues come up, and that's
Yeah.
obviously stupid.
Yeah, look at that janky thing.
I'm almost at a point where I can look at any deck in Anchorage and I can find something wrong. That's how stringent the deck code has gotten. Crazy. In a good way. I mean, people are getting killed because they fall off the house. Poor maintenance or end of useful life in components. Like we talked about earlier, we don't have to tell the client that we think the roof is at the end of its useful life. We do say that. But we don't have to. As part of the SOPs, we don't have to tell the client that your water heater is over 10 years old and you should budget for a new one. We always do, but you don't have to. So if you get a home inspector that doesn't do that, they're completely within their SOPs to do that. There's some, furnace usually lasts about 20, 25. It depends on who you get to as a heating contractor. Some heating contractors will walk in, if the furnace is 20 years old, it should go. And there's other contractors, it's working just fine. There's no holes in the heat exchanger. Don't get a new furnace. Nothing's wrong with it. This all depends on who you get. The cut floor joist, you see that one?
Yeah.
See around this? That's an engineered floor joist. What's that?
Did he cut for the PVC or?
Yeah, you might be able to see it easier on the page, but that happens, I'd say that happens weekly on new construction.
Real construction.
Yeah, we go down, we do a new construction, and invariably, the muni inspector did not find that cut floor joist. You can't even cut one of them, let alone both of them. And then you put somebody that weighs, 300 pounds, and maybe that's a tub, and all the weight of the water, and it's just kind of silly. You're not supposed to do that. It has to be repaired. That comes up all the time.
Is that when you walk into bathrooms and you feel the floor is kind of spongy around the toilet a little bit in some places? Like
That's because it was.
yeah.
It's rare that the spongy toilet issue.
Or not like spongy, it feels like the plywood's like sinking in,
Some
like
going
around the bathroom.
Yeah, pretty much. But you have to go underneath.
Yeah, to see what's going on.
Indoor air qualities comes up quite a bit because we live in such tight houses in Alaska, and the code didn't require mechanical ventilation until more recently. So are you guys aware of mechanical ventilation in the house? What HRV is?
Yeah.
Heat recovery ventilation, or sometimes your bath fans come on 10 minutes per hour just to depressurize the house.
Yeah.
Well, that's become code that if your house is too tight, you're going to have poor indoor air quality. You're going to have flu-like symptoms. You're going to have mold and mildew growth. All this. So they want the houses to breathe a lot more. The old, 20, 30 years ago, the house would breathe just fine. And all sorts of leaky windows, leaky doors. You had really good indoor air quality. You had a high heating bill. So now you're going to have a low heating bill and poor indoor air quality. So you have to balance all that out. And that's what the code has done recently.
And is that for like new construction houses? The code?
Or any house that you modify. So if you go around and you air seal all your doors and windows, and you put in a new heating system, and you do all these things to tighten your house, well, you better do something about the indoor air quality too, because it'll lead to some serious problems.
We're seeing that now. A lot of 60s and 70s houses have been updated with all that energy efficiency stuff that's going on.
So do things just like running your fan regularly, bathroom fans regularly, does that mitigate it if you don't have a specific system? Do you have to have a specific system? No.
So the bath fan system is, it's either on a humidistat or a timer,
If you have the HRV.
without the HOV.
Oh, without.
You can do a mechanical ventilation system with a bath fan or bath fans, and you can do one with an HRV, but the HRV requires ducting throughout the entire house. It's much more expensive. But the bath fan one comes on 10 minutes per hour for the life of the building. And that's how you get your indoor air quality. It's a little bit of a energy penalty over an HRV, but it's much less expensive for the contractor
Right.
to do that.
So all that stuff through Alaska Housing, when people did all the energy upgrades, they didn't know like that was gonna be a factor.
They had to do it. They had to put the bath fans in, or they had to do the HRV in conjunction with, that's part of the weatherization. And that's where a blower door comes in. Have you heard of a blower door test? That's figuring out how many air exchanges you have per hour. And if you go under a certain amount, then you have to provide the mechanical ventilation. Yeah. Okay, almost done here. So egress window. Muni.org, you should all have in your speed dial. Muni.org is great. You can look up handouts, policies. You can, there's a telephone number too I didn't write on, I don't think I did. There's a telephone number you can call and you can get any code question answered. So if you get a home inspection and you're like, what in the world is this person talking about? You can call the Muni and you can say, this silly home inspector, I can't even make heads or tails of it. And they'll say, oh, they're right. Here's the code. Or that doesn't apply to this building because there was a code that came into effect after this was built. Or whatever. They'll tell you all that. So Muni.org is really great. I love those guys. But here's the handout. We talked about that an egress window has to be so big for a fireman or you to get out. But this handout, 8.01 emergency escape bedroom windows in existing structures, says you can also have a smaller one. So it says 5.7 is the code now, but you could have 5.0. And if you're under, if you're under 2004, the window height can be 48 inches, which you can't do now. And you can be, if you're prior to 79, you can be 5.0, and your opening can be smaller. So as home inspectors, we all have this memorized. So when you get the home inspection and it says that your egress window doesn't meet current code, well, you can push back and say, now, wait a minute. It might not have to. Are they saying that it's not 5.7, or are they saying that it's not 5.0, depending on the house? So definitely, most of us have this figured out, but some don't still. It still comes up, especially for new inspectors.
Dave, I have one
Yeah.
where the homeowner, he has a sliding glass door on the bedroom, so that's plenty of room for egress. However, he has an enclosed area outside of the sliding glass door that it doesn't lead to outside, and that's where the hot tub is. And so I was telling him, I don't think this is legal egress because you can't get out. That's definitely got to be correct, right?
That's true. You could have a ladder. You can't put a ladder to get, is it, I guess I don't understand, is it all fenced in?
Well, he has like that kind of corrugated fiberglass, siding or whatever, and it's all enclosed.
Oh, it's
so-
like a porch and,
Exactly.
oh, yeah. You have to exit to the exterior.
Yeah.
This also says sill height 44 maximum to clear opening. You can have 48 prior to 2004 because the Muni allowed all these windows to be put in too high. One thing though is
Steps.
What happened? Is that the last page?
I only got one page left.
Okay, anyway, I think it says, the Muni, a part of this handout says, if your window is over, let's say it's 50 inches off the ground, you are allowed to put a step in.
Yeah.
So the step has to meet all applicable step height requirements and all that, but you're only allowed one. So if you're over 55, then you can't do it. The window has to be lower if you're gonna call it a bedroom.
And it can't be a step this high, right?
It has to meet all applicable step height requirements.
Which is like 7
7 3/4.
7 3/4.
So Muni does allow you to do certain things. The picture on this last page 19 shows special knowledge hardware. This is another one. You've probably seen these. All you have to do is reach out here to the outer edge and move a little clip and open it up, and then the window will meet egress. But if grandma's visiting, or she's got smoke in her eyes, it's dark, she's not gonna be able to find the little clips, so that's considered special knowledge hardware. Muni doesn't allow it anymore. This is another thing that the licensee will. A home inspector, most home inspectors are calling this as a health safety. The Muni is not allowing it, even though they did. Okay. So walking through an inspection, how you have it laid out, and how you determine if it's a significant repair, health safety, etc. So there's nothing in the code that says something's health safety. What? Right? It's your flummox, right?
Okay.
But there isn't anything. There's not anything that says something is a repair item or a maintenance item. We make it up as a home inspector to facilitate this transaction. Right? It has nothing to do, it's all based on code, but there's nothing in the code that says this is a health safety or that's a health safety. So if a home inspector lost their grandmother, that's poor grandmother, falling down the stairs, they might call stair problems as a health safety. Or I've never lost anybody falling down the stairs. No, why are you calling that? So anyway, this comes up all the time. Why do you call that health safety?
So you're saying there's not like a standard?
Zero.
Yeah, health safety.
Zero
Why?
standard.
What does
And
that make
it's
it easier for people?
Exactly. It's a huge issue for me. I used to be the local president of the inspector community. We had all these inspectors over to our house, and we tried to hammer this out for years. Why do you call this? Why don't you call that? Why? And it was like herding cats. It's super, super difficult, and it's for that reason, because you get emotionally attached to that stair issue because somebody got hurt that way. Another thing is the Muni. I should take that back. Well, I'll say it anyway. The Muni, usually when you call the Muni, you'll get this home inspector call this out. Is this really a code? And they'll say, what year was the house built? Because it all is predicated upon the code at the time of build. The Muni is going to enforce the code at the time of build, except for a few items like egress windows, which they've already have a handout. Combustion air issues. So if your furnace isn't getting enough combustion air, it can backdraft, you can have CO poisoning. Safety glazing in windows, smoke alarms, CO detectors, and GFCIs. Those are typically, most home inspectors are calling that as a health safety issue, even though it may have met code at the time of build.
So you're saying like some of them will call the spacing between the handrails
No,
or
that's just
a
crazy.
grabbable
Yeah.
handrail.
I had
Some
the same
won't.
thing, health and safety between the guardrails, yeah, just kind of like this big, and it was for health and safety.
And it used to be 9 inches.
Now it's 4.
Now they went to 6. Now it's 4.
We're getting smaller baby heads
So
Well, I got one too that was put on health and safety where the outside light, it didn't have a bucket and it wasn't, it was kind of loose. And it was labeled as health and safety instead of repair. And so in my comment was like, health and safety, like what? Like, I don't understand.
The inspector had a light fixture fall on a loved one, he died.
Yeah, apparently there was no bucket on the light and yeah, that
I
ground.
would say electrical issues though, almost all
Yeah.
home inspectors, no matter how little.
Yeah.
Almost all home inspectors call that. It's just too easy to get hurt that way, really, especially if you're a new home buyer. So I think most,
Electricity.
yeah,
Electricity's scary.
most of that will go on. as a health safety. General flow, you're all gonna get really familiar with whatever home inspector you use, so we usually go over, do the exterior first. There's a general flow that you wanna do. You make less mistakes as a home inspector if you always stick to your.
You turn all the water on the house, then you go down the crawl space to make sure there were no leaks, that kind of
Exactly.
thing.
The state of Alaska, as well as any professional organizations an inspector belongs to, we belong to ASHI, which is the American Society of Home Inspection. It's the largest. They have the highest ethics, blah, blah, blah. If you want, there's a website here. So if you want to know if your inspector that you're choosing is an ASHI inspector, then you go to that website. You can look them up. See if they're on the list. You can go above the standard, or you can stay within the confines of the statute. So radon testing, infrared sewer scopes, specialized equipment such as indoor air quality testing or special cameras. All that's above the standard. Everybody's welcome to do it, but you open up your liability more as an inspector. And then the last thing, this is just a little blurb on us. There's 3 of us at Discovery. We have central lock access, so if you're late, we can get started. If you don't want to attend the re-inspection, who cares? We're there. We're going to do it. That's pretty handy. New construction certified. We have radon infrared services, and typically same day reporting. So that's my little spiel. Any questions on all that?
Yeah, that was great.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Good time.
Thank you. We really appreciate it. Super helpful.
Okay.
Just turn this.